Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network. I am your host, Lou Perez, and today I am joined by Brett R. Smith. He's a commercial artist, a comic book artist, and at one time, or maybe currently, a colorist, which is very specific. It's a very specific role, and I know little to nothing about comic books, but I'm looking forward to getting into it with him. So, Brett, thank you so much for joining me on my old podcast today.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure.
Yeah. And we started off, I asked him, what did his shirt say? And for those of you who have a video, have the video, you could read what his shirt said. And I thought it said surf lasagna, but apparently it's surf Nicaragua. And it happens to be a reference to one of my favorite, not just one of my favorite Val Kilmer movies, but one of my favorite movies, especially from the 80s. Real genius.
Yeah, real genius. Great film. Heavy rotation on cable, probably in the early 80s, as I recall. It was on HBO or one of those movie channels back then, but I don't think it did great in the theater. But I think it's had a resurgence. It's on. I saw it was on Pluto TV not too long ago. But there's a website which makes Chris Knight T-shirts, all the T-shirts that he wore in Real Genius. And I've had a couple of them over the years. They have the I Love Toxic Waste. They have the Surf Nicaragua. Obviously, there's a International Order of Gorillas, a Roy Rogers one. They got a bunch of them, and somehow they've recreated them, and they're beautiful. So I've owned a couple. But they also do other movies. So I've got a Breaking Away one, which is the Cutters jersey with the 34 on the back. Lisa and I just recently watched that because she had never seen Breaking Away. But Real Genius, fantastic film, so much fun. Gosh, Kent, what can you say? That guy later on showed up in Bachelor Party as the jerk too.
That's right. There is something, I often wonder, and I talked about this with Lisa Di Pasquale, which is Brett's gal, and Lisa introduced us, and I had talked a little. We had talked a little bit because Lisa has a book that's coming out. It's the Gen X handbook for middle age, I believe it is.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about kind of like nostalgia trips to back to the 80s and 90s. And the question I always I asked myself was were the movies that good, or is it just nostalgia? And you just mentioned something. It was in something like Real Genius was in heavy rotation when it came to like TV, and it's like that's from like a different time where it's like for whatever reason there were these movies that were just constantly on TV and you would catch them, and it was like, oh well, maybe I thought they were so good because they were kind of like in front of my face all the time. But then I went back, I go back and I'd watch a movie like that, and it's like, oh no, it's an awesome movie. Like it still holds up. Like it's really, really funny. Like Val Kilmer is sort of, I don't know. Is it possible for as highly as he is praised, I still think he's such an underrated actor, especially when it comes to comedy. As a comedic actor, he's hilarious.
Natural. I mean, the first time I saw him was Top Secret.
Top Secret.
And I went to the movies to see Top Secret because my dad was a huge Zucker Brothers fan from the TV show Police Squad way before Naked Gun. He loved that stuff. The Kentucky Fried Movie, which is their movie before Airplane, which is outrageous. I mean, just an outrageously crazy film. I mean, that's another one you would never ever be able to make today. Never. We went to see Top Secret, and there was nobody in the theater. It's the first and only time I've walked into the movie theater, and we were the only ones. And we walked in, and my dad said, "Oh shit!" Kind of like, "Is this a bad movie?" But that's another one that I think is also underrated. That's a great film. He's a natural comedian. He can sing. He can dance. He can fight. He can fight underwater. I mean, it's unreal.
Also, it's his first movie.
It is. And he's the lead. I mean,
and he's the lead.
Imagine the pressure.
And he plays the role. I mean, he's a movie star. It's his first movie, and I bet if you go through like a lot of like the biggest actors, and you look at their first movie, they're gonna be solid performances. But this one is like another level. And again, like you say, like he sings in it, he dances in it.
Yeah.
He delivers hilarious dialogue. So there was so much
Great.
he was doing on top of that,
I know. I
Yeah.
know. And, and to really cut your teeth with the Zuckers, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I forget the Martha, the director on Real Genius, because she also did Valley Girl, and she also directed the pilot for the TV show Sledgehammer, which was a fantastically funny show. But that's one that when I went back and I watched it, it's some of it's funny, some of it isn't. Some of these films and some of these TV shows um, struggle a little bit to hold up today. However, I think they are powered by nostalgia for us, for the Gen Xers, because that's the glue that holds our generation together. Is you know, the boomers have their glue, and the Gen X have our glue. And for us, it's Saturday morning cartoons, TV shows, sitcoms, movies, pop culture. But I would say largely a lot of those movies, like you were talking about, it's funny. Some of those movies, when we watch them on cable, you catch them in the middle or you catch them at the end.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, you were lucky to kind of catch it from the very beginning, unless you looked at the TV guide and saw when it was going to be on. Um, but I think that a lot of the films really hold up. I was talking to somebody the other day about *Romancing the Stone*,
Oh my God.
which is
Yeah.
which is the two Bobs, Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis. They had done uh, Used Cars prior to that, which was produced by John Milius and Steven Spielberg, and completely flopped because it came out like a week before Airplane. So I mean, they're out for a week, and then Airplane comes out and just sucks all the oxygen out of the room. But that's a really underrated, killer, awesome comedy that doesn't get enough love. But I think that Zemeckis just caught lightning in a bottle on *Romancing the Stone*. You got Dean Cundey, who's one of the best cinematographers. You kind of track these people who work on these movies, and they all work on really good movies. But
Just putting the cast.
Michael Douglas,
Michael Douglas,
fantastic. Kathleen Turner, Danny DeVito. That trio, was really magic, which they tried to kind of recreate with *War of the Roses*, and even the sequel, *Jewel of the Nile*, which
right.
wasn't anywhere near as good. They didn't have Zemeckis back to do *Jewel of the Nile*. That was their cardinal sin. That was their biggest mistake. Just like it's like the Salkins not having Richard Donner back for *Superman 2*, and these producers.
That Kathleen Turner, and talking about
Oh,
watching movies on TV, and that just being in the rotation. That was
Bobby
one of
Heaton.
those. That was one of the *Romancing the Stone* was one of the movies on
Yeah,
on TV in rotation. That's where I saw
absolutely.
it as a little kid,
Yeah.
and that's where my family, I think they first saw my boner, and I was like a little boy who was just all about Kathleen Turner.
Oh,
She just
she was
yeah.
so hot. That's probably sort of, between sort of *Body Heat* and *War of the Roses*, that's sort of peak Kathleen Turner. But there, that sequence where they slide down the mud hill, and he ends up right between her legs. Just,
Yeah.
great set of legs, great body, and that voice, which is
Yeah.
just that sultry kind of whiskey sort of voice. It's just killer. But she's great in it, and she plays obviously the '80s version of a girl boss,
Mhm.
but who is somebody who also is very feminine and comfortable being feminine. It's an interesting kind of sort of dichotomy to what we have today. And obviously, Michael Douglas sort of has that sort of Han Solo kind of anti-hero arc where he turns into, he falls in love, and then he ends up being compelled to do the right thing. But it's just there's so many great one-liners in that movie. Every time I give my dog a piece of cheese, I say to her, "Look at those choppers." Just like the dude, the bad guy with the alligators. He says it like throughout the whole movie at the most like the times when you just don't think that that's what somebody would say.
Yeah.
He's got a gun to his back. Look at those choppers.
And as a as the heroine in that Kathleen Turner, I mean, they do something that might be a little odd for people to see now, which is she she's a woman who needs to overcome in order to become a hero.
Right.
Whereas now, where what was it in a lot of
They're
like
already there.
yeah,
They're
like
already to
like
that
sort of
destination.
the
That's where
Mary
they
like the
start.
yeah, the
Right.
Mary Sue stuff. Like you have like an indestructible woman who can beat the shit out of guys who are twice her size, and then it's like, okay, well, then where do you go from here? As
Well,
opposed to her,
yeah,
like like in Romancing the Stone, she's a romance
novelist.
novelist who's very like kind of a shut in a way, and not in control of even like her sexuality and all that,
Sure.
like that power, of being a beautiful woman. And she, earns it by going through all these tests,
An adventure.
and adventure. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 truly. What's interesting about that movie, and I didn't really catch it because I saw it in the theater. We were supposed to go see Footloose, but my mom had had a crush on Michael Douglas, for years. So it was kind of like
Understandably.
once
Yeah.
we got to the
Films.
theater, it was sort of like, Michael Douglas, we're gonna go see Romancing the Stone. So I was really bummed out. But then once I saw that opening sequence, with the with Michael Douglas and the shotgun and the birds and the bus and everything, his introduction to the movie, I was just like, oh man, this guy's a badass.
Yeah.
But a couple of things that I caught rewatching it recently. I bought it on Blu-ray, and it's a beautiful transfer on Blu-ray. A lot of those 80s movies have transferred really nicely, the color, and plus they were shot by some of the best. And you just don't have cinematography these days quite like those guys from that era. Some of it's the cameras they used, and today they're using all digital, but a lot of it's just lighting. These guys just knew how to light stuff so
Mm.
perfectly. But she writes about the type of character that she eventually becomes. In the beginning of the movie, you have kind of this opening sequence, which is in her mind because she's writing the end of her novel. And this character of Jessie, who is her heroine, comes and saves her, who ends up sort of being the Michael Douglas kind of character in a way. He kind of becomes that character too. And I never saw that kind of dual arc for both of them where they end up sort of resembling the characters that she writes about, these idealistic kind of archetypal characters in her romance novels. She was looking for her Jesse, and she found somebody like him. He's a diamond in the rough, but he has a great arc. And you know, I went and I saw Jewel of the Nile. It's a good movie. Like I said, they didn't have Bob Zemeckis back. I think that was a big mistake, but it's nowhere near as good as that first one. And I just think that first one is just pitch perfect from start to back. And that's one of those 80s movies which really holds up.
Yeah.
So
And you brought up, War of the Roses. And I remember, I forget if it was Gene Siskel or Roger Ebert who was talking about how much they didn't like the movie, in a
yeah.
large part because it's just so bleak at the
Oh
end.
yeah.
And it's like when you go to see, a Kathleen Turner, Michael Douglas movie, you want to see it because of their just, magnetic connection that they have. And in
Chemistry.
In War of the Roses, they're at war, and it's
Yeah.
really ugly. It's not that there's like no really redemptive quality to the relationship.
None.
And it's one of those things where I think maybe I'll go back and watch it, but I think they really lost something trying to do that.
Oh, I think so. Danny DeVito steals the movie. He's the funniest part of the movie. He's probably he's easily the most redemptive character in the movie. But yeah, it's a kind of a tragedy, and I think that people wanted to see those two be happy and in love and on another adventure in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And the worst part about that movie is how it ends. I mean, it's very bleak and awful. And I was kind
Oh
of
god. Yeah, I'm
I kept
remembering it
thinking
now.
to myself when I was watching that the first time, because that's another one that I caught on cable. I didn't see that in theater. I kept thinking it's gonna turn around. They're gonna arc, but they didn't. They just kind of detonated 1,000 feet above the ground at the end, and that was it. And it was just sort of like this. It ended as this sort of cautionary tale, and that's not what audiences wanted.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, and spoiler alert for those of you who haven't seen War of the Roses. At the end, I mean, it's either they both fall, like, kind
From the
of
chandelier.
from the chandelier down to their death, and then I
Right.
forget who reaches out. I think Michael
He does.
Douglas he reaches out his hand, and she knocks it away,
Right.
and
He reaches out his hand to hold her hand
her
as
hand.
they die
Yeah,
together, and it's I mean, I love black comedy. I was thinking about Cable Guy the other day, and that and
Death Becomes Her, I think, is
oh,
another
that's another
black.
Zemeckis. Yeah, I mean, he does those really well. I mean, this is Robert Zemeckis we're talking about. This guy would go on. This is obviously a very talented guy, and whether it's a
Yeah, in
B
case you
movie,
haven't heard of Robert Zemeckis.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, so it's not like he just disappeared, but I mean, from Forrest Gump to Castaway, I mean, he really did move on to, and now he's just, and then like, doing all of his animated stuff like Beowulf and everything. the guy is obviously a visionary, and some of his stuff hits and some of it misses, but I think his greatest era is sort of 80s, 90s. It's like after Romancing the Stone, he went to do Back to the Future. So, and shoot like all three of those at the same time or whatever they did.
Yeah.
So I think they shot 2 and 3 together.
Well, what's so interesting, and for any of my, yeah, I mean, I think my audience will get this, and might think, remember the time where you would go to the movie theater to watch something like a Romancing the Stone or Footloose, or and just do you go to the theater anymore?
I do,
Yeah.
not often as I used to,
wh-
I mean, used to be such
what
a
what brings
regular
you?
thing.
Yeah, what brings you out to it? Because,
Mhm,
for me, I don't know if it's I've just become, older and more irritable, but it's
mhm.
like for me, uh, in the way that you and your dad walked into that empty theater and you're like, "Oh shit, this probably isn't a good movie." When I walk into an empty theater, I'm like, "Thank God I only have to deal with me, and I'm probably seeing a movie with my kids." So it's just me and my kids.
Yeah,
Because the second more people come in, it's like, okay, who's the asshole that's gonna be on the phone?
exactly.
Who's gonna be talking? Who's gonna, you know,
Yeah.
so it's just a miserable
Yeah,
experience
I
for
mean,
the most part.
that's what started to drive me out of the theater probably in the mid 2000s, 2010 kind of era. I would either go on, Wednesdays at a first showing, so there's nobody there, because theater etiquette is not theater etiquette anymore. Nobody has any theater etiquette because the theaters will not kick anybody out. There's no enforcement to the rules. So you're just in there sort of hanging with other people and hoping that they're gonna keep their mouths shut or stay off their phones. The phones is the biggest issue I have with
Yeah.
people because it just, you're in a darkened theater and you have a suspension of disbelief which is going on and you're in the movie and then all of a sudden you have this light shining somewhere in front of you and it's
Mhm.
just, it ruins the entire thing. And I've yelled at kids before. It doesn't do any good. And then I get, then I've yelled at young adults, teenagers, and then their parents meet me in the parking lot and say, "Why are you yelling at our children?" And I'm like, "Children?" I'm
Yeah.
like, "You mean the people that are taller than me and bigger that are
Right.
acting, now I understand why you call them children because, parenting fail. You act like a child." But yeah, man, we go on odd times. We go when there is, we're hoping there's going to be as little people in the theater as possible. Whereas I remember seeing Die Hard on opening night,
Oh, wow.
and people were cheering and laughing. Um, they were definitely into the movie, and that's only happened maybe like one other time, and that was Batman 1989, which I saw twice in the theater on opening day. I saw it one day on a big screen in Phoenix, and then we were like, "Let's go see it again." So we went to the mall. We went to my mall, Paradise Valley Mall, which has now been demolished for high rise housing and retail. Uh, but people were, reacting, but at the same time, in the quiet moments when the story is going on, people were quiet and respectful. But, it's like when John McClane, wraps the chain around, what's his name's, Alexander Goodenov's neck in that fight sequence and throws him into the wall. People stood up and were just like, "Yes!" Just like going crazy.
Yeah.
And you accept that. I understand that and I'll accept that. But it's like, if you're in a theater and you're talking at the screen and saying, look out, Denzel or something, I got a problem.
Yeah.
I got a problem.
I was at, I was in a movie theater in Brooklyn, and, I was seeing X-Men First Class. So
Good
this
movie.
is, yeah, good movie. Saw it in the theater, and, uh, there's a part in the beginning where I guess they're speaking German, so
German.
there are
Great
subtitles.
scene. Oh,
Yeah,
such a good scene.
so there are subtitles, and the thing is, the family with their children behind me, well, I guess the children can't read subtitles. So the dad was reading the subtitles out loud to them, which, was a little bit annoying.
Yeah.
And then throughout the movie, he was explaining to them, he I think he kept repeating the title of the movie. "This is the first class. This is why this and this is happening." So they weren't the worst. The worst were, there was a couple in front of me who kept talking, and I went, "Shh," and "Shh." shush, and it was about the third shush that the woman turned around and said, "What do you mean shush? You're in a movie theater." And so apparently I was the asshole for not talking during the movie.
Yeah,
Uh,
everybody thinks that the theater is their living room now.
yeah,
And I don't know if that's because they can order movies at home and they see some kind of crossover event happen once they walk into a theater establishment. But, there is a social compact that we all agree to abide by. And when you're in a theater, you keep your mouth shut. And unless you're laughing, if you're a comedy and you're laughing, I get it. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. But that's also part of what's fun about the theater is the interaction and to
right.
see the dynamic play off the screen with the audience, and also to share in that, to share in those laughs and those thrills. It's cool. It's a fun experience, but it's not when you're treating it like you can pause and take a bathroom break or talk to people. It's just ridiculous, and I don't know what happened. I really don't understand what happened because, the Gen X parents out there, obviously, like me, grew up with a very different environment theater, but they don't abide by those rules and they don't teach their kids at all. I mean, it's a total Gen X parenting fail. I don't have children, so I have free reign to criticize everyone else. I mean, nobody can point at me and say your kid does the same thing, but I just want everyone to have a great time at the theater. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm trying to prevent people from being jerks in the theater, you know?
Well, it's like, what are you doing here? Like
Exactly,
it's like
dude.
if people are on a date, I'm like, go home and fuck. Like go to your
Right,
car and fuck. Like
right.
what are
Well,
you
well,
doing
you
here?
remember you remember if you wanted to make out back in the day in the theater, and sometimes that was a safe place to do that because it's dark, you go in the back. Like,
Go in the
if you
back.
wanted to make out or if you wanted to signal to the girl you're with that you wanted to make out or this was gonna be something's gonna happen, you go to the back,
You want to
you
put
know?
your dick in the popcorn,
I mean, yeah, exactly, like
Yeah.
Diner. God, that movie. That's another one, man. Jeez, that one
Yeah.
holds up really
We
well. That
we,
is a classic.
my
Love and
sketch
Zen.
comedy partner, Greg, and I, he wrote a sketch and starred in it, and it's up, and I'll share it in the description here, where it's, a guy does the popcorn trick, but plays it, like, completely real, like, just how uncomfortable it would be
Yeah.
to try to get a hand job with when your dick's in a bag of popcorn, a box of popcorn. It's a
Well,
really
it's
it's a real funny sketch.
cardboard. Yeah, it's sharp cardboard that's probably you gotta
You gotta get
prevent.
hard you gotta get hard before you do it, and then, like, how much popcorn do you have to dump out, you know?
That's what's so
Um,
funny about that scene is because when you watch it and the gag still works whether you've seen Diner or not, but she keeps going for the popcorn and she's eating and everybody's watching. It's playing off the other guys' faces, but you just keep anticipating how much popcorn's in there. When's she gonna
right.
get to it? And then finally
Yeah.
she does, and it's such a great reaction. You
Yeah.
know.
One thing as me producing most of the stuff that I make is for, online,
Mhm.
YouTube and stuff. That's where I, came up, making stuff. But, on the occasions when, like, a sketch of mine will be in, like, a film festival,
Mhm.
and getting to watch it on a big screen with an audience,
Oh, that's
it's a
huge.
yeah, it's a really fun reminder, because it's like, "Oh, here's the joke, they're laughing. Here's the next joke, they're laughing. Oh, they're laughing so much they missed the button. Okay, now, we're back." And it's like you can kind of forget, like, "Oh, there's media that's consumed on a big screen with a lot of other people," or at least that's, I think, a really noble goal, you know?
The information that you get back as a comic, a writer, a performer, I mean, that's gold, man. I mean, you can't other than stand up, you can't get that kind of,
Yep.
back and forth where you're A/B testing, you're really seeing what hits and what hits hard, what hits kind of, sort of medium. I mean, I would think as a stand-up comic, I mean, that's like the craziest thing. Just comedians in general, that's hard. That's really hard.
Yeah,
Um
yeah,
Gary Shandling used to liken it to math. He was an electrical engineer from the University of Arizona, so he was already like you know a math head. He was a he thought about, but he used to think about jokes like math, and them having like this equilibrium and kind of like this equivalent or outcome that had to be measured by the formulas before. I don't really understand it because I'm the other side of the brain, dominant. But I love that analogy. It makes so much sense because it's a formula.
Mhm.
So when you get to interact with an audience, you get to sort of see how the formula.
Yeah, I'm so happy you brought up Gary Shandling. It's almost like I planned, all of these topics. I've actually been meaning uh,
Yeah.
to write a little bit or share more of Gary Shandling because I'm a huge fan of the Larry Sanders Show
Oh yeah.
and the documentary that Judd Apatow did
I
on
still have not
Shandling.
seen that.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's really very beautiful. Like there's
Yeah.
the through line is really really powerful.
Mhm.
And I'm good friends with Scott Thompson from the Kids in the Hall, who was on the Larry Sanders Show.
Yeah. Scott
And
was so great on that.
oh my god! And I mean, Scott just as a comedy mind is just
He's
another incredible guy.
he's for Gen X, Kids in the Hall is huge. It's
Yeah.
absolutely huge. I mean, McCullough, he was probably my favorite with Cabbage Head and some of the. I mean,
Hmm.
he always just sort of spoke to me. But those guys were so talented, and that
Yeah.
show, another one that you just couldn't quite do today, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it's like that first Gary Shandling show, which is very funny, but not quite there, but very worthwhile watching the original one.
Yeah. Yeah.
The jingle at the beginning is kicks off the fun,
Yeah.
But I think that Larry Sanders Show was just um, groundbreaking,
I think.
legendary.
I think that's my desert island show. I think I could, if I had to, I could live off of the Larry Sanders
Yeah,
Show. And
same
for
here.
those of you who might not be familiar with Gary Shandling, or his stand-up, I recommend watching his first appearance on Johnny Carson,
Oh,
which holds
kills.
which
Oh my
holds
god.
up to this day.
Yeah,
What I and part of what I love about it is not just the material.
yeah,
He's so fucking happy delivering it.
I know.
It's, like, impossible not to just like this guy and not wanna be laughing at what he's doing, and it just so happens his material is insanely, good that it holds up 50 years later. So, yeah, what a just I mean, just incredible talent, and
Yeah, another guy that just kind of like sort of moved to Hollywood to a degree, or at least started writing for Hollywood, and then was just in and was just working like crazy. So I mean, another super talented guy that just ascended, and created just some of the best TV of that era, hands down. It's
yeah.
I mean that's a sad one, man. It's like some of these guys, they're just giants. And it's like with Redford going, we're talking about movie stars and people who Val Kilmer, some of these guys, what they have is that they eat up the camera. The camera
Mhm.
loves them. Harrison Ford, some of these people, Tom Cruise. You watch Tom Cruise. You watch Taps. Taps is a good movie. You know, um, but the guy that steals the movie is Tom Cruise in every scene. It's kind of the same with The Outsiders, with his effed up teeth, you know, um, and chocolate cake all over his face and doing handstands. But I mean, some of these guys just eat up the camera. The camera just loves them. They're just magnetic. Same with the women, and we see fewer and fewer of those types of people on film these days.
Yeah. Yeah, um
I mean, Redford, it doesn't matter what Redford was in. He was just amazing. The camera just loved him, and he projected something which everyone was able to, capture. I mean, it's kind of inexplicable. It's just art. It's great art that people connect to, and he was a conduit,
mhm.
and that's in the visual storytelling, because it's all visual storytelling. It's the most powerful medium. Whether you're doing film, comics, animation, we as humans, as far back from the caves of Lascaux, which is I like to say is like some of the first comic book drawings. The Sistine Chapel. That's a giant comic book on the ceiling. It's the Bible told in visual sequential order. It's a giant graphic novel on the ceiling. But I mean, this is how we communicate. We tell stories. Lou, what did you do today? Well, I got up and I had breakfast, and then I went to the bank, and then I took my kids here. You're going to tell me a story. and we just we're losing not only the talent, or we're not harnessing. There's a lot of great talent out there. It's just untapped. I'm sitting here watching Terminal List Dark Wolf, which comes out tonight, and I like the first Terminal List, and I like Chris Pratt. He's okay. He's one of these silly guy lead actors, which I have an issue with. Um, but Dark Wolf is amazing. That's one of the best things. That is the best thing that Amazon Prime has produced so far. Jack Carr is
Yeah, yeah, you have to
our
tell me about
age.
it. I'm not familiar with the Dark Wolf.
It's all based on Jack Carr. He's a best-selling author. He is a former Navy SEAL. He's about our age. He grew up on all the stuff that we did. If you follow him on X, he'll post about his favorite TV shows, Magnum PI, Airwolf, his favorite movies, and he's a funny guy. He goes to airports because he travels quite a bit. So he'll find his novels in the gift stores at airports, and he'll sign them and then put them back.
That's great.
Yeah, but I think he's one of these guys who, like Taylor Sheridan, who is also our age and grew up consuming the same pop culture, and I think is recreating it in their own voice. I
Mhm.
see a lot of the same elements, a lot of the same characters. I see archetypes from old that's being applied to new, and it's so refreshing and so awesome. And these guys write men and women so well, and then they're creating interesting characters. But Dark Wolf is the biggest problem with these Amazon Prime series. The first one was The Terminal List, which was a couple of years ago, starring Chris Pratt. Very awesome, worthwhile.
Dude, I have no
Checking
idea.
out.
I had no idea it existed. There's so and it's not
Amazon
like I'm
produces a lot of
totally out.
crap.
It's not like I'm totally out of it, It's
Yeah.
like, maybe I'm
There's just so much, Lou. There's
yeah.
so much that they throw at us, these streamers, because it takes them a year to do 7 episodes.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the biggest flaw with streaming. I mean, whoever made this decision to bet the farm on streaming in Hollywood and TV, what a boneheaded decision that was. I mean, who are these people, these tech bros who are funding the Hollywood now? I mean, what a bunch of morons. But it makes sense. If they're tech bros, then they want everybody streaming. So,
Right.
they produce a lot of crap. Most of the stuff Amazon produces is crap. It's awful. Nobody watches it, and it gets really awful reviews. But once in a while, they do a Reacher, which is a good series, especially the first season. But I think that Jack Carr's got something obviously special about the books that he writes, the characters, they're national bestsellers, and they're staying faithful to the source material, which is what the fans want. And ultimately, that's always the best course of action.
Yeah. You
Stick to the
you
source.
Yeah, you brought up, Taylor Sheridan, and, I really I loved, 1918? Is
That
that
was
what
the
the
best. Yeah.
I thought that was the best, like, as a complete, story. I think that was great,
Yes.
and then there's oh, wait, wait, wait.
19
No, 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 18, no, 18 something, that's where I was.
Yeah.
That's the one I liked, 18
The
something.
first one with, Tim McGraw and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, Faith Hill,
Um,
right. That was
yeah,
very
I
good.
yeah,
Great
really
first
like that.
act, great second act, very solid, good third act.
Yeah.
1923, eh,
Yeah, yeah, I'm kind of out of I mean,
weak third act. I mean, weak, weak, weak.
it's a great foreplay, you
Yeah.
put that on, and then your wife's gonna wanna, fuck you, because, she's like, "Would you, you know, would you do everything that this guy's doing would you I don't think I'm
That's the
capable."
funny thing about the action adventure you know, genre, which I would put those 2 movies into, is that women will flock to those movies,
Yeah,
far more than men will flock to a girl boss movie or a romantic comedy. So, I mean, Hollywood understood that in the 80s and 90s, that the women will go see these movies because they wanna see Michael Douglas, they wanna see Sly, they wanna see Arnold, Jean-Claude, whoever, Bruce Willis, um, be a strong, masculine, tough guy and kill the bad guys and save the girl.
yeah.
I mean,
I was feeling, I was watching Yellowstone, I was with him, and then it's so funny that all I need is just one moment, and then I'm gone, where I'm like, "Nope, nope, you didn't Taylor Sheridan, you normally got it, and you play things realistic, but here, you don't, dude." And I'm gonna tell you where it was. I don't know
yeah.
if you'll remember this,
Mhm,
but the daughter, the badass daughter,
mhm.
the drinker
That
and fighter,
right,
yeah,
right.
uh, she gets into a fight with, her dad's new girlfriend who's the environmentalist,
Yeah,
right?
Right.
And the environmentalist says, um, that she's done Brazilian jiu-jitsu for, however many years. And then there's like this, back and forth, blah, blah, blah. And then Beth beats the shit out of her. Let me just tell you, if that environmentalist did Brazilian jiu-jitsu for even 6 months, she would have taken Beth down, mounted her, and submitted her. I
Armbar.
was dude,
Yeah.
I was out. I was like, "Nope." I'm like, "Nope." Like, you shouldn't have even said that line. Why
Yeah.
even say Brazilian Jiu You should have said Krav Maga.
Right.
You should have said karate, and make sure you pronounce it karate.
Right.
So then I could understand the bullshit there. But yeah, I'm petty, I guess. I'm a petty fucking ass.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor's obviously he's a talented guy. I think that he's also a complete control freak. He doesn't use other writers. He writes everything. That
Which is
season 2 or
amazing.
season 3 of Yellowstone had a staff of writers that he managed, and that only lasted for like one season because he just said, "I'm not going to do this anymore."
Wow.
So, you know, you know, that's how it's traditionally done. You have a showrunner that kind of oversees a group of writers, and usually that can be done well. I think about Deadwood, and I think about David Milch, and he obviously was on the
My
set every
god,
day.
you're saying all my favorite things.
Well,
Deadwood is,
man, that guy's that's another guy who's, I love these guys. I love these masculine, tough writers, whether it's Walter Hill or John Milius. John Milius is probably the greatest writer that Hollywood ever produced. Big John, Conan the Barbarian, Red Dawn, Big Wednesday. This guy was just a legend. He's ghost wrote so many stuff. Ghost wrote Dirty Harry, but like some of these guys they just know how to write men, and they also know how to write women really well, and they just create magic. But Taylor oftentimes sometimes misses, and I cut him slack. Yellowstone to me was a modern Dallas.
mm,
I had
yeah.
just watched the entire 12 seasons of Dallas during COVID because I wanted to kind of get back to uh, a time when TV was commercial and the studios wrote for everybody.
Mm,
So I watched Magnum, I watched Miami Vice, I watched Dallas, I watched Dynasty. Um, these are all great shows. They're a lot of fun. Some more than others. Dallas, especially in the first 3 seasons, is just like peak. Once they lost the dad, the father figure, kind of the wise old king sort of archetype story character, it kind of got sideways. But there are some great seasons of Dallas. Outside of that, it's just kind of up and down. But they all used writers' rooms. They all knew how to do this stuff. It was a well-oiled machine back then. I don't know what's happened today, but when I watched Yellowstone, I started watching it and I was like, "Oh my god, this is Dallas." And I could pick out the characters. That's Bobby. That's Jr. Beth was Jr. Taylor turned Jr. Larry, Larry's character into a woman. And I've always said of Beth, and I've never heard anybody really ever talk about this, but Beth is probably the most pro-life character on TV of
oh,
maybe
yeah.
the last, I don't know,
That reveal
40
of
years.
the abortion and the complications that
Well, and the
that
pain that she carries, the rage and the anger, I mean, she carries it her
against
whole life.
that adopted brother, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
but it affects everything in her life, her
yeah,
relationships, who she is in the boardroom, her interactions with strangers, with people. I mean, she's a firecracker, that just,
yeah.
she's like an M80 that you're holding, so it's like, um, I understand the outrageous nature of that character. I also know that the women who love that character, like, really love that character. They think she's just a badass, and they sort of see elements of themselves, and they can live vicariously. But it's like women and men want different things when they watch TV. I mean, men want to be the character. They want to be, John Dutton, or they want to be Rip, and women want to see themselves in the character. So it's like they want two very different things, and that's sort of where the gender neutral writing that's come into play, which is kind of emasculated
Yeah, I'm looking to
all the male characters. That's where that comes from. Is this
I'm
sort of
look
gender neutral sort of writing?
yeah, I'm looking to do, bring more John Dutton into my life, which is anytime I'm talking to somebody, I'm just gonna make sure I'm looking away.
Right.
It's out into the distance no matter what we're talking about, so if I go to CVS and I'm like,
Pause.
and my pause and like, which aisle's the shaving cream in? And just look away and stuff, and then have like some,
Do you want your
some little
receipt in the bag? And then just kinda like, "Not today,
not today. Email, please.
not today." Yeah.
Well,
The stoic.
yeah, for the
Kevin does that so well, and it's just kinda like, they lost a lot of the magic once, Kevin was off, the whole thing sort of it started like 1923. It had, a lot of momentum and some good beginnings, but it wasn't quite able to stick the landing in any real
yeah, I haven't
authentic way where people
forget
felt.
when I checked out. Yeah, I forget when I checked out on that one. But also they were doing this thing where it's like it's on Paramount, but then you could get it
Yeah,
watch it through this, and then,
yeah,
it became
man.
like a scavenger hunt. Like, how am I gonna
Exactly.
track down this thing to watch
Yeah,
it?
exactly. And I'm kind of unsure. I think Landman is probably much sharper, and I think Taylor kind of gets interested in other things, but the studio wants him to continue to rinse, wash, and repeat because that's what the studio does.
Mm,
That's their design. But I think he gets interested in other things, and so I think his passions probably as an artist and what he preferred to be working on would maybe be Landman. Maybe that's why Yellowstone in 1923 suffered. I don't know. I don't know, but they weren't nearly as good. You can't expect, it's just like any good director or writer. I mean, it's like, oh, that was a bad Sam Peckinpah movie. Well, it's like, well, that's kind of like the beginning of the conversation.
mm,
Well, how bad was it? Well, it wasn't as good as The Wild Bunch. Well, it's just like, well, it's like The Wild Bunch. Come on, that's one of the greatest westerns ever made. So he's a talented guy, and I really like Landman. I'm looking forward to season 2. But I ask myself, of all these series that he makes, how many of them are going to be watched like I'm watching Dallas or I'm watching Mac,
mm.
and how many of them can be watched over and over again? Because there are some series from the 80s like Magnum PI, that I can watch kind of over and over again. I never really get tired of them, even if I know essentially what's going to happen. It's just great TV.
Yeah,
And Tom's got that face. He's got one of those faces which just eats up the camera, man. You
yeah,
just love him.
yeah, and, I was reminded that he was, Mr. Baseball, in that movie
Oh,
from there.
that's a
Think
great movie. That's a great
great
movie.
this is a great, great movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
People that people forget, or maybe they don't know that, all the things that the Japanese, emulated post World War II. They love the bebop jazz. They love, rockabilly. They love baseball. I mean, these are like huge cultural institutions over there.
and they ended up,
It's interesting.
producing a guy who's, you know, better than Babe Ruth, some would argue, you know?
That guy's
Um,
insane, Joey.
it's
Yeah,
yeah, it's great. But,
he's insane.
I wanna make sure we talk a little bit about, a topic that, you're an expert in with you're a comic book artist,
Mhm.
colorist, you've been doing it for a long time now. What has I mean, where are we now with
Mhm.
comic books? I mean,
Oh,
what is the field what does the field look like, you know?
uh, boy, it's a lot like Hollywood in the sense that, the people who in power at Marvel and DC are left way left of center. The editors, who are essentially the gatekeepers. The editors are the ones that hire people. So, um, uh, a lot of blacklisting has been going on in Marvel and DC of conservative artists and conservative writers. I'm one of them for a long time. I mean, long before, I was blacklisted or cut out of the business, because I colored for Marvel and DC Comics and other publishers. Have been for, at that point in 2016, probably about 25 years.
Wow.
So, but the editors are just people who are kind of like activists. They have a message. They have, and I'm not the only one who's talked about this. Jim Shooter, who was the editor in chief of Marvel Comics in the '80s, which saw probably its biggest expansion, from the standpoint of business model. Um, he talked about it before he died recently. He said, the people who were at Marvel and DC, are propagandists, and they're pushing propaganda. They're pushing a message, and the message and the propaganda outweighs a good story and trying to tell a story to a wide audience. And there's a good video of him talking about this, and he just said, their job is to entertain, but he said the people there have, um, either lost, that understanding, or they were hired, under different pretenses. So it's a bit of a conundrum. There are the flagship books who obviously they take a little bit better care of, but when you look at where X-Men is today, on the shelf. And just over the course of maybe the past 10, 15 years, in relation to the MCU, this is the biggest complaint I get from people who I talk to when I say I'm a comic book artist. And they say, oh, if I wanted to take my kid to my kid loves the Marvel movies, loves Avengers, loves Captain America, loves Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. If I wanted to take him to the comic book store, what comics would you recommend that I pick up from Marvel or DC? And I would say none. I would say none. I said, Iron Man is a 15-year-old black girl named Riri Williams, and
Mm.
Thor has been turned into a woman. The Hulk is now Nerd Hulk. They've merged Bruce Banner like on screen, so you've completely emasculated the Hulk. This person's gay, this person is trans, this person is non-binary. All that woke stuff has completely infected the big two, Marvel and DC Comics, and because of that, um, they've just lost, like Jim Shooter said, they've lost the ability to entertain. It's just all propaganda that they're pushing, and people don't want that. So right now, Marvel and DC account for maybe about 12% of total comic sales. Um, uh, uh, 65, 70% of all sales in America is manga,
Mm.
is Japanese comic books and Japanese graphic novels. So people have shifted from buying American comics, these are American customers, to buying Japanese stuff because they tell better stories. They don't push propaganda. It's a lot of different genres. Um, and they also tell kind of long format, more long format stories. You get more graphic novels over there from the standpoint. And the difference being is typically a single comic book is like 22 pages, where a graphic novel would be 65 plus pages. So it's much more of a long kind of novel sort of format. But yeah, I
Uh,
mean, I think,
with
it's troubling.
yeah, with the our talk about like the '80s. Now I'm imagining a a reboot of the movie Gung Ho, but instead of cars, we're dealing with comic books.
Yeah.
It's like the Japanese, come into an American town and have that comic book plant, and the Americans want to be woke, and the Japanese are like,
Yeah.
tell stories where men kill, chop heads off.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot to that. The boy brands. It's very similar to Hollywood, and you can look at Disney recently saying, oh, geez, we want boys back. It's like, well, then, you bought Star Wars, you bought Marvel in order to have boys brands because you already were a princess brand prior to that. They had that locked down.
Yeah,
But now they've turned the boy brands into princess brands, or these sort of gender neutral sort of, gray area. They're just not straight boys brands. And when you look at the boys brands of the 80s, they are titans, of the industry. I mean, He-Man, $1 billion, G.I. Joe,
right.
Transformers, Hasbro and Mattel just owned the 80s from the standpoint of toys. And then, that transfers into the comic books that they made with Marvel and DC at the time, as well as the cartoons. I mean, these were absolute titans of the industry, and they had boys. And I'll tell you what killed He-Man was She-Ra. Once you introduce a girl into it, it no longer becomes a boys brand. It becomes a girl and a boys brand. And I remember all my friends were like, He-Man's not cool anymore because it's not for us. And that's not like somebody said that to me, but that was the general impression back then. Fortunately, there were other IPs to kind of glom onto and go and check out, like Centurions and Silverhawks. And there was a lot back then, that a boy could choose from the standpoint of action adventure, you know?
Yeah. My kids have been, letting them watch, Thundercats.
Great show.
And yeah,
Ruby
and
Spears. Yeah.
one of the questions my son Andreas has is like, "Why does he keep saying snarf?"
Right.
And
Snarf, snarf, right.
yeah, and I'm like, "It's just his thing, man.
Yeah.
It's just," and I explained it's kinda like the Smurfs, the Smurfs say Smurf,
Yeah.
and he's saying snarf, snarf.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that was a Rankin Bass. They were a great animation studio. They did a movie called The Last Unicorn, which I saw in the theater as a kid, which is a very cool movie. But yeah, they did Silverhawks and they did Thundercats, and it was all really good writing. It was a lot of fun. I think it's funny. I saw a clip of the intro to the Rambo cartoon the other day, and I forgot how awesome that was. Rambo and the Freedom Force. You had a Chuck Norris cartoon.
wow.
Back then it was all about everybody saw what Mattel did with He-Man, and they wanted to go after that. And that was a lot of the impetus for the relaunch of GI Joe, which had been sort of out of out of the just not really producing much at the time. They kind of ran out with the Action Force in like the late 70s. So they wanted to reboot it, and they had Reagan, they had patriotism, and they just nailed it.
Yeah.
They just
Well,
absolutely
I guess
nailed it.
well, I guess it's really hard. It's like, how do you create things when you hate the in a way, you hate the audience and you hate the foundations that these characters are built on?
Right.
Because, if you look at even with, like, anti-heroes, you could tell when the person's writing their anti-hero, at least the great ones, like, they really like this character.
Mhm.
They wanna give you um, this character has multiple dimensions to them as opposed to just, like, good versus evil,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
The
it is.
sophistication
Yeah.
of some of the writing back then is actually pretty amazing. And I've met some of the guys who actually, working in comics and going to cons and just meeting people. I've met some of those writers that worked on those shows, like Flint Dille, and it's just interesting to talk to those guys who were in their 20s and they were writing for me when I was 9 and 10 in like the mid 80s. And you know, those guys had little brothers, and I think in a lot of ways they were writing for their little brother, but at the same time, they also understood that the audience who they're writing for, the boys who were 9, 10, 11, 12, even 6 to 9, kind of, because that's sort of that sort of demo. They're pretty sophisticated, and they've been reading comic books. They probably even understand death because they've watched movies, they've watched TV. So I think that these days it's the soft bigotry of low expectations. It's just everybody underestimates the audience. They don't understand that they want authenticity, they want sophistication, they can handle all that stuff. But I think within comics, where it's what's happened with the vacuum that Marvel and DC has left for the male audience, and even for women, who just want traditional male characters, or they want female characters who are not Mary Sue's, who are not these girl bosses that require no training, that don't experience any adversity. They just overcome and overcome and overcome. She overcomes. It's just this wildly retarded cliche,
Yeah.
and they've shifted to indie comics, independent publishers. Those are all the rave right now. And I color for Eric July, who
Okay.
has the Rippaverse, and I've been coloring him for about 3 years now, and it's a blast. It's probably one of the best. I've colored for indies before, for smaller companies and publishers, but this has been one of the best experiences I've ever had. And from the standpoint of creative to pay to keeping me busy, it's a great experience. It's better than I ever had with Marvel and DC, and it's a small shop, so everybody's family. But they're telling stories, and people are crowdfunding these things on their site. They're basically pre-ordering these books because he's making them in advance. And there's a number of different artists, some of whom have been blacklisted by Marvel and DC. One of which is Graham Nolan. That guy created Bane for DC Comics along with my buddy Chuck Dixon. Graham's one of the most iconic Batman artists of all time. He's a legend, and he's got his own universe, his own Kickstarters, and his own comic books that he's making. So you can seek these creators out. A lot of them, Andy Smith. There's a bunch who all worked for Marvel and DC who are now doing their own creator-owned properties, because that's really where the money is. When you're working for Marvel and DC and you're working on Superman, like I did, you're working project to project. So I'm going to color this book, and then I'm going to color the next book. Maybe I'll get a 4 to 6 run on, as far as the story goes, like 4 to 6 issues. And then I'll go and work on something else. So it's all about the relationships you have with the editors and the books that those editors are working on. So it's like, oh, Brett, you did a great job on Superman. I'm going to put you on Justice League next month. That's typically how it works. It's your own personal relationships with the editors. But up until maybe a couple of years ago, colorists like me never saw any royalties off these books. Everybody always assumes that like we're rich and famous. We work per page, we get paid per page, and it's all work for hire. It's all subcontracted out. The writer, the artist, the inker, the colorist, the letterer, all subcontractors. So there's no health care. There's no salary. It's all basically, we eat what we kill. And
Are you
if we're
so
lucky, we'll get some royalties. They Marvel and DC started allowing colorists to have royalties not too long ago. It's not a lot. I mean, you've really got to have like a 10, 11 years worth of work under those two publishers to have uh, Magnum checks, like those checks Tom Selleck used to say he'd get from the Magnum syndication. And
yeah.
sometimes they're like 99 cents, sometimes they're $3,000. You never really know. But Magnum's being shown in Vietnam, so Tom gets a check. Streaming ended all of that. These guys don't get a dime from the shows that are streamed. And sometimes I think that was a way around paying these guys later in life or at all. But it's a tough business to be in from the standpoint that you work project to project, but you hope that you do a good job and you show up on time and you have good rapport with everyone to where they say, hey, you know what? Hard work. The best reward for hard work is more hard work. So here's some more work, Brad. You know.
Yeah. And
So
when you're as a colorist, like, are you hand coloring every single page,
when I
or
started out, it was markers. In the mid '90s, when I started out, it was still all traditional mediums, and it was on marker paper. And I used these. We use these alcohol markers, which I still use today. If you're having a commission done or something done that's physical, but it shifted to Photoshop in like about 2000, so you could import these files. And somebody figured out that you could paint in Photoshop, and you could
Mhm.
import, you could make brushes, you could do all these things. Because originally it was just sort of like Photoshop was just kind of like a digital darkroom originally. It wasn't really intended for what it has become. It was mainly for photographers. But it shifted over to digital, and that's basically what everybody uses now. So, um, you know, um, it's good and bad. I don't miss the cleanup and having to buy more markers and refill markers and use an
Well,
airbrush and all this crap.
well, were you getting high at the time,
Oh, those things
with all those
smell
fumes?
like crazy. They're alcohol based, so they do smell, and you just sit there over them, just huffing.
Yeah.
So I that was one thing I do not miss at all.
Mm.
But a lot of times, if you go to a con, if you a comic book convention, you'll go to Artist Alley, and all the artists are set there, and they're doing commissions for people throughout the days, and you can pay for a colored one, so somebody will use some markers, and you can get full color illustrations or black and white ones. So it's everybody's still using those markers, man. They're still around. They smell kind of good, actually. It's kind of like the smell those whiteboard markers used to make back in the
Uh-huh.
day. Those things
Yeah.
had kind of a cool smell to them. You'd sit there and it'd give you like a little head high.
Yeah.
So, but but yeah, I don't. The Photoshop makes it faster, makes it a lot easier. You can get a lot more done. You can change things. From the standpoint if your editor comes back and says, "Oh, I need Captain America's stripe in the center is white. I need to change red." You can go back in pretty quickly and do it. Sending files. We used to send stuff in the mail. First it was artwork, and then it was CDs. Color art to Marvel and DC back in New York, and now it's just all FTP. It's all transferred. It's really pretty seamless, and that's even and that's also the great thing that's really empowered the indie publishers is that you don't have to have a bullpen full of artists like Marvel used to have in the '80s. Physically, they're cranking stuff out. You can do all this stuff remote. I just had a guy do a cover for a new project that I'm working on who's in Brazil, who works for Marvel and DC and Rippaverse and some other publishers. So um, it's pretty cool to be able to utilize, you know, really, really great talent, even if they're not in your time zone necessarily.
Mhm.
So, but it sucks, man, because on one hand, you know, the big two always they were such titans of the industry, and they were kind of the gold standard. And now they're just sort of pale comparisons of what they used to be. And a lot of that, I think, is the corporate mentality and the corporate culture. They're owned, one's owned by Warner Brothers, DC's owned by Warner Brothers, and has for a long time, about 20 years, maybe 25 years. And Marvel's owned by Disney. So, and that's the other thing, there's Marvel Comics in New York, and then there's Marvel Studios in Burbank, and they're completely separate. They don't talk to each other, they don't interact. And in fact, I think a lot of the people working at Marvel Comics right now in editorial are there not because they want to make good comics, but because they want to get a job at Marvel Studios and move to
Right.
so guys like Jim Shooter, who got into it when he was like 14, writing for Charlton Comics, and then by the time he's like in his early 20s, he becomes the CEO of Marvel. Those guys were lifers. They were in it for the long run. And you can make the same comparison in Hollywood or any entertainment. I don't understand why some of these people are in entertainment. They're not in it for the, visual storytelling, for the art of storytelling. Justine Bateman's talked about this, that, that, if you want to create great stuff, even if it's commercial, it takes great care. And in order to take great care, you have to hire people to take great care and to have something personally invested in what you're creating. And that maybe that's just them saying, I want to do the best job I can. And that contributes something. So when I look at the people who are staffed now and the people who are the gatekeepers, they're just, they're clowns. They're people who want to leapfrog into Hollywood because that's where all the money and the prestige is, not in comic books. That's silly stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well, one place where you get prestige is on the Lou Perez podcast.
that's why I'm here.
That's
That's
why
why I'm here.
Brett R. Smith is here. Brett, thank you so much
You
for
bet.
joining me, and
Anytime.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did.